I just got so fed up with Coinbase. I was like, screw this. And I just tapped into my, well, it says we're live. Okay.
Screw it, we'll do it live.
Yeah.
Do it live.
Okay.
We are live. Hello, everybody.
We are live. All right. Welcome, everybody. If you're watching recording, hang on. I'm going to get the link into the Telegram chat room so people can lurk properly. There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Today is April 12th, 2023. This is the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee. I am Chris Troutner. I helped found the PSF, and I also maintain fullstack.cash, which is infrastructure as a service and a little consulting. Let's go around and do a quick round of introductions. Aaron Shoemaker, why don't you start us off?
Aaron Shoemaker, and right now I'm working on a scheduling app, but I've been working with SLPs and NFT stuff with the Permissionless Software Foundation, and I'm gonna steal Aaron's thunder by saying I really like the software the PSF is developing, and it is needed.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Stoyan. We'll break up the Aarons.
My name is Stoyan Zhekov, and I'm helping with some JavaScript libraries and recently messing with Aaron's server.
Nice.
Yes.
Go ahead, Aaron Sunman.
So I'm the other double A Ron in this group right here, and just saying, welcome y'all. Permissionless Software Foundation. It is increasingly clear that the ability to transact is under attack with the Restrict Act, but also develop. And if the developers aren't able to develop, they can't build tools to fight against all of this stuff. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. I've been a big fan of the PSF, and I'm glad to be a part of this technical steering committee. Welcome, y'all.
Right on. Right on. With that, let's jump into the agenda. So as always, our agendas are on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation group in a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee. We file them as issues. This is issue 52. So the scope of our meetings covers the cache stack, the pay-to-write database, the DEXs, our governance, and the documents around those. And now, more recently, this sort of CoinJoin project, which I've got an update for that. So first, let's go into the governance updates. I'm really happy to announce that version 4 of the pay-to-write database has been released. So this implements the right price that's set by the minting count, the PSF minting council. So just to recap for everybody who watches this, the PSF has a group of token holders who hold governance NFTs, and that's what allows them to speak in the VIP room and vote on proposals. And within that is a subcommittee called the Minting Council, who all have their own NFTs. And we have created a new technology around these NFTs, and what it allows it to do is these NFTs act as homing beacons. And so while this NFT can move around from address to address, it can be sold. The homing beacon feature comes in that we can look up the Bitcoin Cash address holding it and the public key associated with that address from the blockchain. And then we can on the fly generate a multi-signature wallet, which then the people holding that NFT can then, it's usually like a 3 of 5 type wallet. So a threshold of them can vote to approve certain transactions. And in this case, they approved a transaction to update the price of the cost of writing to the pay-to-write database. So the idea is for us to come together every 3 months and update the price, because the price is defined in PSF tokens. And so the Minting Council we're trying to target 1 penny, 1 US cent dollar per write. So we need to update the value in PSF tokens to reflect what that is. So this is great because the previous write price hadn't been updated in quite some time. I think it was like 0.12 and we updated it like 0.08. So it's almost like a 50% reduction in the cost of writing to the database. So it's nice to update that. And so with this update, and actually I just wanted to show you guys this library. So the specification that allows for this ability to update decentralized systems, update the consensus rule through this sort of NFT homing beacon process, it's defined in PS 009 specification. And so I created this PSF multi-sig approval JavaScript library, which implements the specification. So this library has functions to like get all the holders of the NFT. So to like use the homing beacon feature to pull out from the blockchain all the information about those holders. You can give it a Bitcoin Cash address and it'll search the transaction history for an approval transaction. And
Sorry,
yeah,
Should've-
no problem.
could have muted. Allergies.
Yeah, it's that time of year.
Chris, is the command line wallet also updated to use this library?
Not to use this library. So yeah, it's just I need to circle back around and do that. It does all this stuff, but it does it sort of. I created the library after I got the PSF wallet, the command line wallet working with it. So I need to circle back around and basically just take out a lot of that custom code and replace it with these functions. That's what I've done with the PagerDuty database.
With this library, we could just, spin up, say, a React app and create some UI to use this real easy for somebody.
Yeah.
Or ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think this is a general approach. I think this is just like a really powerful general approach where a group of potentially anonymous individuals can come together and update the consensus rules of a decentralized system. I don't think there's ever been a system for that before like this. So, we're going to use a very similar mechanism for minting new PSF tokens at some point. But I could see us building other sort of decentralized systems. Like anytime, like the PagerDuty database is a perfect example of like, well, I run a copy and some of you guys run a copy, and we need them to all sort of come to consensus on and work together on things. And so one way you can do that is a hard fork by just updating the code and telling everybody to run the new version. In Bitcoin, we've seen user activated soft forks and developer activated hard forks. So those are ways to change the consensus rules. So this is a new way to change consensus rules of a decentralized system where basically on startup, the system's using this library to like look up if there's been any updates. And if there hasn't, it uses the old version that it validated. And so from here on out, whenever we want to update the right price, we just make a transaction and all the instances of the PagerDuty database will automatically detect that, validate it, and update their rules. And this doesn't just have to be for right prices. I mean, this is any arbitrary data, any arbitrary consensus rule.
Well, I've got a buddy who works at a nurse staffing company, and we might be talking about utilizing SLPs, NFTs as like badges for places you visit. And
nice.
This particular thing was a question I had. Well, how do I make it so that it's easy for, say, the company to create new tokens and issue them? Because using a library like this, I could easily create an app that works for all of them, where they just go to one place and whoever's on their marketing team can just sign a change transactions. Maybe it's 3 people, and generate new tokens or new transactions.
Yeah, well, this isn't so much for generating new transactions. Everything kind of flows from. I'm glad you asked this because it's. I got a jet flying overhead. Hopefully the mic's not picking it up too hard. But it all flows from the group token. So this is like the core piece of information, the group token that generated the NFTs. So if you and this is where it becomes very general. So if you, in the example that you gave, if you hand these badges out as NFTs and they're all generated from the same group token, then you can use this function to like look up all the NFTs and all the addresses that hold those NFTs And then just from this one call, like now you have all the information you need to like say airdrop them additional tokens or prizes, or send them an end-to-end encrypted message. So that's sort of where this all flows from, is like that group token ID is the one piece of information that's sort of where everything flows from.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so let me just run through a couple of the, so then there's this update transaction. So there's an approval transaction and an update transaction. So I generated the update transaction for the Minting Council, which is kind of this complex JSON object. And it just goes into a normal transaction. And then all the approval transaction does, which is the multi-sig part of this, is the Minting Council is just approving the update transaction. So they point at one another and they reinforce one another. And that's this this last call where you validate the approval transaction. So these two transactions, they contain enough information to validate one another. And this is kind of a computationally costly call. So like in the pay to write database, it just does this once. And then the next time it starts up, it looks to see if there's any new approval transactions. And if it hasn't, it knows it's already validated the last one. So it's able to pull that validation out of the database. But yeah, this is ultimately what everything leads to, is this sort of self-referential, self-reinforcing update and approval transaction, how they validate one another. So this has been a big multi-month project, trying to create the Minting Council, generate the transactions, and then implement these changes into the pay to write database. So this is a pretty big deal. That's why it was a major version change. So the next steps that I want to start working on is, number one, increasing the 1 megabyte limit. So for our pinning cluster. So right now you can only pin up to 1 megabyte, and this is working really good for token icons. Launchpad IP is using our pinning cluster very heavily right now. We haven't launched it yet. We're getting ready to launch an NFT creator, a really cool app. And it's using all this tech, and the token icons get stored in the pinning cluster. And so far, those icons are for the most part under 1 megabyte. So it's been working fine, but I'm looking forward to increasing this so that we can store whole websites in the pinning cluster, and like larger pieces of information. I'd like to raise the cap to 100 megabytes. And I think I can do that now that the right price feature has been added.
So it's using MongoDB to store, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's using MongoDB to sort of track the payments, but the actual data is stored just with IPFS.
So it's an IPFS format. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's breaking it down into their tree essentially. And what happens if, like, if you got a file that's bigger than 1 megabyte right now, you just can't do anything with it, or because that would break down in a different structure than IPFS, but how do you account for that?
It just won't pin it.
It just won't pin it.
Yeah. So there's the pay to write database. That's like the foundational piece of tech. And then there's two like optional add-ons that you can make to the pay to write database. One is this ability to pay in Bitcoin Cash rather than PSF tokens. That's just a convenience thing. And then the second one is the pinning cluster. And so if the pinning cluster feature is installed, then when the pay to write database detects a new database entry with like a specific app ID that's for the pinning cluster, it passes that information off to the pinning cluster. And the pinning cluster doesn't know anything about payments. All it knows is that, hey, here's an IPFS hash, check it out. And if the file is under 1 megabyte, then pin it. And if otherwise, do not pin it. And so it's the update needs to take place in the pay to write database part. Because right now that's doing this sort of price calculation on whether they've paid for 1 megabyte. Because right now it's 1 megabyte's one write And so the prices are the same, like the price to write to the database is the same price to store a megabyte. So the math is super easy. So what I've got to do to raise the limit is this sort of price calculation where it's like, well, here's how many megabytes the file is. Here's how many PSF tokens you burned. Is that enough to cover it? Like that's the piece that's missing right now.
That makes sense.
And then I can raise it up. And so I'll probably start with 10, but I want to get to 100. And I don't know if we need to go above 100 because you can store a lot. Like that's 100 megabytes. It's a pretty big web app. But it'd be cool.
Not if it's 3D, my friend.
Yeah. But I'm super excited about this pay to write database that I've talked to about before. I think this is like this is our future cash flow. Is like not only do we have this decentralized database, which is great for all sorts of things like token icons and token metadata and mutable data. We've also got this file storage, this pinning cluster on top of it. So we've got both the database and the file storage side of things, and it's permissionless. You just pay with Bitcoin Cash and it gets out there, and it's the least complicated in terms of like using it, like understand, like Filecoin is a ridiculously complicated system because trying to actually, if you ever peek under the hood, try how those storage deals work is like super complex. And by comparison, our system is very simple and very cheap. So I think that there's a lot of value, and we're in sort of this niche that nobody else is really focusing on.
Yeah. Jerry's got some comments here.
Oh yeah, read them out to me. I can't see them.
I think James Kramer of SLP had worked on a Bitcoin files OP return format similar to how SLP tokens are processed. He played with the paid a script address or something to store big files.
Yeah, I worked with him on that. And we've all pretty much agreed. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that it's really expensive and it's highly prone to failure. In that what it does is, like, let's say you take a 1 megabyte file. Well, the op return of a transaction can hold 220 bytes. So it'll take that 1 megabyte file and chunk it up into a series of linked transactions. And so one big problem this used to have was it would run up against the transaction limit. You can only, I think, it used to be 25. You could only have 25 unconfirmed transactions in a chain. So 25 times 220 bytes was the maximum amount of data you could store. That limit has been removed, apparently. But I think this is a potential attack vector, because I know my understanding is that Bitcoin Cash just removed the limit, but the computational power required to compute a chain of UTXOs goes up quadratically. So if someone used this technique to store, say, a gigabyte that generated millions of unchained transactions, it'd be really interesting to see how all the full nodes in the world would deal with that. That could be a bad thing. I don't think anybody's ever run that experiment before.
Yeah.
I used it a little, but it was a little gimmicky. And I think they use it mostly for not binary files, but for JSON files. I think even the Wiener Money was using it in the swap protocol in the beginning, just to save small JSON file instead of on IPFS directly on chain.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's working kind of, but for like this kind of binary files, like images and stuff like this, I don't think it's valuable option.
Yeah, when that chain of transactions is only 2 or 3 transactions big, like for a small JSON file, it works pretty good. And in fact, it's probably superior to an IPFS solution. But once you get beyond just a few, like a kilobyte, it starts to really have issues.
Well, there's a few issues I see with, where you're pulling what. So like IPFS, the more that are in the clusters, or even if somebody connects through IPFS, you're going to get more replication. I haven't written this paper yet. I need to, but it's basically on transient data theory, and it's the idea that not all data has to be permanent. I mean, you look at a company like Snapchat that's doing that, but what they're doing is on their servers. But with IPFS, if something is popular within that network, people are going to pull it down from nodes that are essentially seeding it. And then they, for a 24-hour period, they will begin seeding it. So if something becomes more popular, it will exponentially grow on the network and then recede away. And something like the pay to write database works very, very well for that sort of thing, because you need to have a place for the data to recede to.
Right.
So while the effect of being viral in the sense of transient data becomes very, very cheap, because if everybody's accessing through something like an IPFS client, they're all seeding it at the same time. Maybe you pinned it to 4 main places, but every time somebody's pulling that data, either from that main source or somebody else on the network, it's generating larger and larger amounts of that data availability until such a time as it's not needed. So like a photo, a news story, anything like that, this is transient data. You know, it can be very popular. It can, you go onto the network, something like an IPFS network, people can grab it, and then when they're done with it, it recedes back to something like a pay to write database, and you can still go and get it. It may not be as fast as when there's 100,000, nodes that are seeding it, but it's still there, and that's the idea of transient data and how the pay to write database plays into that.
Yeah, you nailed it, Aaron. One of the biggest or one of the most common stumbling blocks I see developers have with the IPFS is they think that it's like magical storage, like they can just store stuff for free and it just magically takes care of itself. And then they're really disappointed to find out that that's not reality. And just like you said, like there is this sort of natural distribution of the data of popular data. And but at some point it becomes not so popular. And so you have to have someone on the network willing to store that data. And that's the pay to write database. Yeah. And so that's why it's an excellent system for sort of bootstrapping this data. But the way you explained it is beautiful.
Well, I see in the future, IPFS, and I don't know why they haven't been going towards this already, but a simple social media app like Snapchat, but the back end is IPFS, and it's using something like the pay to write database to pin that photo. So when I take a photo, it costs me whatever, a penny to post the photo, right? I see the transaction as the person. I see the transaction. I'm like, oh, penny to post the photo. Boom. It's posted. It gets popular. It costs, the company running the social media app nothing, pretty much, because an IPFS node is built into the social media app. So when you open your app, you're already being a node on the network. Yeah. And so it would be very cheap and cost effective way to do social media. And then you don't have the problem of like an Instagram where you have to literally store all this data for all these years because people utilize you like their photo album,
Right. Right. So you just mentioned a really important trade-off, because, this, in many ways, what we're talking about right now, like that, no one has the answer. We're all collectively trying to discover what the answer is. And one of the lessons I've learned over the last few years is like I like to use one US penny as a threshold. Like a lot of people will not pay a penny to do a social media post, and that's we've sort of collectively as an industry learned that is true. And so I started asking myself a couple of years ago, like, what data is worth a penny? Like, what would somebody gladly, happily pay a penny for? And so like a Craigslist ad, I think that's definitely worth a penny. Particularly if that penny is paying to put the ad in a way that like is a low friction experience, in a way that a government can't mess with it. So that's kind of the lens through which I've looked at this stuff. And this is why I think Nostr is a very novel approach to this, because it's sort of, it gets away from the centralized database model like Facebook and Twitter, but you're still not paying for anything. So that actually, because I think like a lot of people agree that like social media is one of these things that people just won't pay for, maybe in certain situations like Substack or something like that. But yeah, so that's a novel approach. So all these sort of modern infrastructure and software that we've come to love, like they have these primitives and these like sort of primitive concepts, or fundamental concepts on how they're built, and we're still collectively trying to figure out like what the right design is.
Oh, totally. And I think that like when it comes to social media, maybe people aren't going to pay to post, but they would pay to save a photo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't necessarily need to save all the photos that go on my Twitter or my Instagram, you know, but the ones I do want to save to make them readily available. And the other thing is, if they're on my phone, they're already there. When I open the app and it launches the IPFS node, it's automatically seeding that. So if somebody did want to find it, they could when the app is open. If I wanted to make it available for after, this is any data. This is the idea of transient data. Data is on the network, it's off the network. As it gains popularity or use, it becomes more readily available. As it wanes, it recedes. And I think this is a paradigm we're moving into with data, where we used to have this paradigm where it's like everything's got to be stored. We're going to have warehouses and warehouses and warehouses of data that's stored. But really, does everything need to be stored? You know, or is it just making it more efficient? And if having a process like this makes it easier.
So as a consumer of social media, I would rather only see posts of people that would be willing to pay 1 to 5 cents for each post. Like, I mean, if you didn't value it enough, even pay a penny, then I don't really want to see it. It's like, and it would keep, I mean, this is like the whole concept, and we kind of had this discussion last time a little bit about, it'd be better to have some cost so that people can't spam 50,000 things or 100,000 or 1,000,000 things and it costs them nothing, right? So as a consumer, I'd really rather have it cost something, and I'd be willing to pay that myself, certainly.
Yeah. Well, on that particular topic, this is why I really like Noster's proof of work. So, I mean, this isn't fully baked yet, but some of these relays, like they realize they have a spam problem because everybody can post, and a lot of these relays are getting swamped by spam. And so one of the NIPs, one of the features that they're starting to implement is, so like if you when you hit the sort of post button, your computer has to, on average, do like 5 seconds of work. And then it attaches that proof of the work to the post, and only with that proof of work will that Nostr relay accept the submission.
Wow. And so it's not actually costing something except the computer.
Except computer time. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And so this stops the spam problem. There's no like material cost, there's no token. It's a really elegant solution to, I mean, we're really zooming into these very fine details of like, how do you build a decentralized social media?
Well, the weird part about that is Adam Back actually started building that's why he started working on this stuff, is a stamp problem, right? Because of this. All right, go ahead, Stoyan. Sorry.
No, I mean, not willing to pay for the posting is maybe pre-Web3 idea, because now everybody is like familiar with the transaction cost fees. When you want to do something, you need to pay fees. Mm-hmm. And also one more maybe aspect is that people don't want to pay because the payment interface was pretty bad. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to post, it was like a big deal to pay everything. It's not just one click and it's over. So if the interface is improved, I don't think people will complain paying a penny for a post.
Yeah, unless the friction's hard, right? If you had to pull out a credit card and pay a penny, right? That's way too much. That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we've been over at Launchpad IP. I've been helping them implement the pay to write database into their system, and it's actually a bottleneck to our whole workflow for creating NFTs, because this process of like contacting the pay to write database, asking it like what is the price of a write in BCH, and then like sending them the BCH, and then the pay to write database, like somebody has to generate a proof of burn transaction, and then that proof of burn transaction has to be added to the submission to the pay to write database. And so this all takes time, in about 5 to 10 seconds. And then if you have to do multiple writes, like we have to do maybe 2 or 3 of these per token. So it takes like 15 to 30 seconds to create a token. And so one of the improvements I'm thinking through right now is to a pay to write database could have sort of pre-burned PSF, because that's the ticket to write to the to the database is you have to burn PSF tokens. So they could have these sort of pre-burned UTXO or tokens, and so when you ask it to submit data, it already has it like a ticket basically ready to go, and it just is like, okay, here's your ticket. And so
Give 'em
that
a
would
taste.
really speed up the process.
Give them a taste.
Yeah. Or you're basically, you're just, instead of paying them to burn a token on the fly, you're just paying them for a pre-burn token.
Right.
Everything's the same. It just speeds the process up.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, sorry for the
No, man,
segue.
these little side quests, this is why we have these meetings. That's where the gems lie. Okay, so one other update I want to start working on is to track and reward cash stack service providers. So Aaron, that includes your server, that includes the handful of servers that I've got up. So I already kind of have a prototype for this. I know you guys have seen that, but the idea is once a day or maybe twice a day, an app would go out and basically do like a liveness test to all the cache stack instances that it can find, and then it'll just write the results of those tests to the database, and then we can use that to then automate rewards once a month to the people running cache stack infrastructure.
Awesome. With randomized up or queries, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because you wouldn't
Yeah.
want to query the same time every day, because then somebody could just turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Hopefully, we'll get popular enough to where we have to worry about those sorts of things.
That's true. That's true. We don't have to worry about that right now, but
All right, so a few other tech updates. So the CoinJoin project, at least this phase 1 is complete. I'm pretty happy about that. Let me show you guys. So I put up this documentation site, ccoinjoin.com for collaborative CoinJoin. And in the docs is basically there's this quick start, and it has a video, and it just runs through the same demo I gave you guys, I think in our last meeting or 2 meetings ago. Where you can just basically simulate the exact same thing I showed you, where you have 2 wallets that join in a coin join. And I've had a few people run through this and actually submit issues to the GitHub repo, so that's been really encouraging. I've got info in here about the why funding is needed, and this really comes down to the legal landscape. Like, the way that I'm doing this is the only way that I think it can legally be developed. And then I've got like just the full logs from when I was in Mexico and out of Mexico working on this project, just for all the Flipstarter campaigners. They want to see where their money went. This is like a day-by-day breakdown. So it's not, unfortunately, the project's not, we didn't achieve the goals that we set out to achieve. Like, we don't have a fully functional desktop wallet that can do this, but we're pretty close. We do have a desktop wallet that compiles, and we have this sort of proof of concept, but there needs to be some further development. So I'm hoping to do another Flipstarter in the future. And now that the framework and the rails are in place, I don't necessarily need to be the one doing the development. It's really just sort of polishing what's already been developed, so we can hire less expensive developers, maybe like in, say, Argentina or Venezuela, who really need the money for the next round. So if I do another Flipstarter funding and it does get funded, I suspect we'll be able to get a lot more bang for our buck.
nice.
But
Jerry had a
go
comment.
ahead.
Could do a checkpoint system throughout the day to check if system is running. Mario Kart often uses this to check against lap breaking. That's back for the
Yeah.
cash stack. So,
Oh, that's an interesting concept. Yeah. All right. Well, as far as the coin join is concerned, I'm glad to sort of have the project in a done-ish state and able to move on and think about what the future is, and give the BCH community time to because some people really, really like the approach that I was taking here. They were convinced that, like, there are problems with the way Cash Fusion works, and that this was a superior direction. So hopefully enough of them will fund the next phase of development. Okay, a bunch of other smaller ones. There was a bug in BCH API, and this was related to the Fulcrum indexer, and it would call on certain calls, it would call to api.fullstack.cache, even if you were running your own local cache stack. And so this was, I've been like, now that I know what the problem is, I realize I've been dealing with it for years. And it was just, you know, because it's a rate limit type of thing, it's completely transient, like there's no way to anticipate it. And so it really took some digging to, like, I was literally looking at two systems running all the same software, and one would behave in a different way than the other one. That's what allowed me. And then one of them was freebch.fullstack.cache, which actually gets a lot of traffic. So I was able to test a system with no traffic and a system with traffic, and that's what ultimately let me find this bug. So that's fixed. So yeah, if you're running your own cache stack locally, it should not need to call outside the system to do anything. So that's the idea there. I don't know how much we talked about this. I had a pretty intense discussion in the cache token devs Telegram channel with all the BCH devs who are working on cache tokens. I think I told you guys I did find we found a bug that was burning some tokens, and it was extremely rare. It was only happening for like a couple seconds about every 3 months. And that's why it was so hard for us to find. And it was a very specific time critical race condition. And ultimately what was happening is the protections I have in place to prevent burning tokens. What it is the wallet reaches out to the token indexer that it's getting the information from, and it asks, it's like, hey, are you synced? Like, give me proof that you're fully synced and I should trust you. And then it proceeds to get the SLP token info. What was happening is that first call where it was getting the proof, that sort of proof of trust, was succeeding, but then the immediately next call would fail. And so it was extremely rare. And it would lead to burning tokens. So what I've done is I've made this update to BCH.js and the minimal SLP wallet. And so if it sees a UTXO that's 1,000 Satoshis or smaller, and it can't positively identify it as an SLP token, if it identifies it as an SLP token, it'll just say, this is an SLP token, and it'll put it in that category. And actually, I should show you guys. This is what you get back when you make that call, is all your UTXOs, they get categorized. So there's a BCH category, an info category, an SLP category, and a null category. And then in the SLP, there's type 1 and NFT. And then within those, there's further categories. So when you get these UTXOs back as a developer, you know very clearly like what UTXO represents what type of piece of data. So the idea behind these info UTXOs is, like, most token UTXOs are 546 Satoshis. There's not really any reason, which is dust. There's not really any good reason to make it more than dust. And but some devs do. I talked to Pat at Mainnet, and they like to use 1,000 Satoshis. And the reasoning behind that is if they send you a token that and the colored UTXO is 1,000 Satoshis, you have enough UTXOs to then make one more token transaction without having any BCH separate from that. So that's kind of a good idea. Also, in this new cache tokens protocol that's coming live in May, there's this BCMR baton, and this is their solution to the mutable data. I thought about doing it the way they're doing it. I think it's an inferior way to do it, but this is what they've settled on. It is actually possible to burn one of those batons, and then you can no longer update the mutable data. And so this feature prevents that from happening as well. So it should not be possible to burn SLP tokens or these BCMR batons with this update.
Seems like I've commented back on this one on Telegram, and it felt like this was a this was something that should have been done long ago. One, I mean, I don't mean that we should have had the foresight to. I mean, I'm just saying that this is a problem that existed for a long time. Burning these SLP tokens accidentally, for example, for wallets that didn't pay attention to them. But if there was a category of info UTXOs, wouldn't have lost much money. It would have helped with privacy because of the dust. What do they call it? The dust privacy problem, where certain agencies, 3-letter agencies might be.
Oh yeah, I didn't
like
mention
putting
that's a good
those things
point.
out there too. This would just lock those and they wouldn't get included. So I think this is a great idea all the way around. It helps with cash tokens. It helps with SLP and probably any of the future things without causing much issue.
Yeah. That sort of dusting attack is a whole nother thing where yeah, it's not necessarily. Yeah, nobody really knows why they happen. Like there's a lot of reasons why someone might randomly send you dust. It all has to do with surveillance. It might not be associated with a 3-letter agency. It might just be an advertising company. But yeah, that like if someone sends you a dust, it'll get stuck in this category and you don't have to worry about the privacy issues around
Right.
because
Otherwise it gets picked up and it gets included in transaction and privacy is leaked all over the place. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is a great thing. And I'm hoping that more wallet providers or at least coders look at this and start considering adding that into their software, because it feels like it answers a lot of other things. We don't know what's coming up next in terms of development, but this would probably address a lot of the things.
Jerry says CoinJoin can disrupt the UTXO dust attack, right?
Yes, it can. Yeah, that's a big feature of the CoinJoin is that
Right.
if someone dust attacks you by sending dust in order to, so we should just take a minute to explain that. So a dust attack is when someone sends you dust, and the way it's an attack is it's not so much an attack when we use things like the minimal SLP wallet or the wallet.fullstack.cash, because those are single address wallets anyway. We're the priority there is convenience, not privacy.
Right.
But if you use an HD wallet like Electron Cash or the HD wallet that's part of the CoinJoin project, these dust UTXOs, they are meant to track you through a wallet that does not reuse addresses, because the idea is that UTXO would get included on a payment and then it would show up on the next address, and so they would be able to track you across addresses, or the change would wrap around. And without CoinJoin, that's exactly what happens. That's how they're able to track you, or they're able to get a better sense of your government identity and what addresses they can positively associate that with. But in CoinJoin, that UTXO does not get carelessly included. It essentially gets isolated. And then when you CoinJoin, it'll get included on the input side. And then the CoinJoin will break the mathematical link to any addresses that flow downstream from that.
So basically they send you dust, it gets included in the transaction because the wallet's just combining UTXOs to send, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can track and see, oh, I sent dust to this person and then they did this, and that's where the UTXO went. So
yeah, you can kind of think of a dusting attack as like the opposite mathematically to a CoinJoin. Like a CoinJoin breaks those informational links, and a dusting attack creates informational links. So yeah, so a CoinJoin is the appropriate response to a dusting attack.
Funny thing about this too, it feels like one of the questions that come up sometimes is, okay, what BCH wallets support individual coin control? And the funny part about it is most of the time, those questions are associated with these sort of like dealing with particular coins, and dusting attacks probably are one of the biggest reasons why people would care about this. This deals with it without having to create a whole separate UI for actually individually controlling coins, because it deals with them as info ones as a category.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's when you said marketing, that makes a lot of sense. As a marketer, it's kind of like a cookie, you know, and I can
and it is. I've seen different things where with these like, because they're not necessarily an attack, they might just be trying to get your attention. I've seen people send dust with an operatern that's like, hey, use, this coupon code to get, like clearly you're a Bitcoin user because, you're seeing this message, and you're technical enough to like look at an operatern. So like use this code to get, off of a refurbished hardware wallet, which you should never buy.
I got some used hardware wallets to sell you. Let me tell you.
Okay, last sort of tech item here is, this is just a minor one, and I'm kind of wrestling with this, so I'm interested in your guys' feedback on this. I created a new endpoint on the pay to write database, and it's a get call, REST API get entry balance, and let's see, I've got the API info right here. And so it returns the Bitcoin Cash and PSF token balance of the pay to write database wallet. And so it's intended to do two things. One is it's a liveness test just to make sure that the system's up and running and responding. And then the second is that information that comes back, you can tell if like your wallet needs to be, if you need to add more funds. But it's a publicly exposed endpoint. So that might not be good because then anybody can find out how much Bitcoin Cash you have in the wallet, but it's not like a personal wallet. It's the app's wallet. It shouldn't really hold a lot. You just need to have enough. And so right now I'm kind of leaning towards like, it's okay to divulge this information. This isn't really like private or critical, or it can't really be used by an attacker. Because number one, you shouldn't even have that much money in the app wallet to begin with. And having this information doesn't really give them any way to like get it. So I'm kind of leaning right now that it's okay to do this information. It's more of a convenience thing. If this was private and secure, the proper way to do it would be to request a JOT token first, and then you could make this API call by passing the JOT token, which would prevent public access to this API endpoint. Only authorized people could get it. But it's just more steps, and I can do it that way, but I just don't really see any sort of negative security issues with this. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm not.
It's co-
Oh, go ahead, Stoyan.
It's convenient maybe to have this information visible because before it was mentioned that if you have PSF tokens, the whole operation will go faster,
Right.
because it will burn the PCF. So it's good you can check, okay, I still have PSF tokens here, so I don't need to send additional ones here.
Right. Yeah, that's
So-
how we're using it at Launchpad. That's exactly how we're using it.
Yeah. So, and yeah, as you mentioned, it's not personal information. It's like, I don't know, maybe there will be in the future way, for example, to sponsor this wallet. Some people can decide to send here some, because you're very
Yeah.
good in your service, so they will send to this wallet PSF tokens, so it
Donation
can
address.
operate
Yeah,
faster.
yeah, that could be another line that gets returned as like a receiving address for anybody who wants to help fund the wallet.
Yeah. If
Yeah, that's
it's
a
a
good point.
community service,
Like
it
a looking
can be
for funding
sponsored from everybody.
NPM.
Yeah. That's a good idea. That I hadn't thought about that. That's good feedback. Well, yeah, that's the agenda. Thanks for sticking with that, you guys. I always really, I just want you all to know I really value your feedback, because a lot of this stuff I'm developing in a vacuum, and so without your feedback, like I just don't get any. Like and I've made that mistake in the past where I'll make a design decision and then I'll find out months later, like, oh, that was actually a pretty bad idea.
Never been there. happened.
Yeah, none of us have, right? Exactly. What was I thinking, right? Well, part of it is because we're all mostly stuck on our own island, sometimes literally and sometimes figuratively. We don't really sit down like I used to at a big company and have design meetings all the time. I mean, that's the big difference between having a small thing like this. So, I mean, having time with y'all really does help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am interested in some of the conversations you were having on the Telegram in regards to BCH, that question you put out, I think you put that out since the last technical steering committee
Oh, in the VIP
in the
channel
VIP
about sort of
channel.
stuff. Yeah, well, yeah, that's good. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. This is a good time to sort of revisit that. So just to recap, I've just had some there's anytime you make a generality, you're going to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So I've had certain individuals I've seen certain individuals really going out of their way to emphasize that SLP is dead, and like they don't want anybody to talk about SLP tokens, because cash tokens is the new thing and SLP is dead, and let's not talk about people using SLP tokens. Let's not encourage that kind of discussion. So I find that a little offensive. And then also I've just had other developers like very aggressively trying to get me to participate in the cash token development. And I've been very clear, like, no, I'm going to treat this like smart BCH. Like I'm going to wait a while. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic, but I'm going to stand on the sidelines and just see what happens, because I don't necessarily trust the people involved. I don't see that the cash tokens like solves any like obvious hair on fire problems. It is an iterative improvement in token protocols, but at this point I think it's really overhyped, and I'm waiting to see what the reality is when it goes live. So the reason I reached out to the VIP room is I'm feeling increasingly like I need to just be very public that I'm stepping back from Bitcoin Cash community. And really what it hinges on is this notion of platform risk. This is something that has alienated me from the Bitcoin Cash community, is because if you identify as a Bitcoin Casher or identify as a person in the Bitcoin Cash community, it tends to mean that you think the Bitcoin Cash is going to be the blockchain that beats all other blockchains, and it's going to be like the one crypto to rule them all, and it's awesome, and let's do nothing but shit on other blockchains. It's this very toxic maximalist leftover from the BTC community.
Mono crypto ideology.
Yeah. And as a business owner, I've been fucked over a couple times by blockchains that stop working for a period of time. And when you're married to one single blockchain, it doesn't matter how good you are at operating your business or how good your software is. If you build on a foundation, like you are held hostage by that platform. And this is not unique to blockchains. Anybody who's built on Twitter or Facebook has felt this pain. Anybody who's built an actual like serious business. And so this platform risk is like a very well understood industry thing. And so I've always been big on building on multiple blockchains because they're platforms, and I want to reduce by making sure my software runs on 2 blockchains. I've reduced my platform risk by 50%, and that's a very smart business move. So the reason we were talking about it in the VIP room is I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't projecting my own ego and assuming that everybody else felt the same way. I wanted to make sure the actual NFT governance holders also felt this way. So it was really good because I got strong confirmation that everybody else acknowledges that platform risk is a serious thing to consider. And I saw a lot of people really appreciate what you said, Aaron Shoemaker, about this notion that development far outpaces adoption. And so a lot of these projects get abandoned in that gap between development and adoption. Yep. And I've seen that over and over and over again. And I think that's why people so appreciated you saying that so much, because so many people have seen that happen.
Yeah. And it's a very common thing to, like, I'm an entrepreneur. If I pick up something that just came out now and I start running with it and they drop support for it, I'm dead in the water. So yeah, I'm not necessarily incentivized to use it right away, but that was my point, was that it just severely lags and then it gets dropped and not used. Whereas the SLP protocol, this is going on what, 7 years now? 6-7 years?
It was developed kind of
2017,
2018, 2019.
Okay, so
I'd say 2019 really.
so we're going on 4 years, almost 5 years of development with this,
Mhm.
right? So that's something I feel a lot more comfortable. Like my buddy's company, they want a simple badge system, you know, so
Mhm.
that they can hand out. The nurse went and worked at this hospital, and then they can show their friends, I've collected all these, you know, just an incentive marketing thing.
Yeah.
So SLP makes a lot of sense for that, especially built on Bitcoin Cash or eCash, where it's extremely cheap, extremely fast. So if I'm going to build something like that, I'm probably going to build with SLP. I'm running one of the servers. You know, you guys do a great job of maintaining everything, making sure it works. And so that was kind of my point there.
Oh, Jerry wrote something. Cash token only allows 1 token per address.
Well, that's interesting. That
I
makes
did
sense
not-
now that he points it out.
I did not know that. That seems like a limitation. They use V out 0. Oh, so the first entrant,
Oh.
wow. I mean,
Yeah, these. So thank you for that information, Jerry. Because he's been in there. I've seen Jerry in the Cash Token Dev group, like trying to really working hard to get like clear. It's so hard,
right, get clear
Jerry. Now that I know
limitations.
you're on the call, he has struggled
think-
so hard to just get a straight answer from these guys.
Yeah.
And,
On the other
so I
hand-
have been laughing for having to work so hard, Jerry. I appreciate you trying to actually get like just like a yes or no question to some of these answer to some of these questions.
I think nobody still is not using several V outs for several tokens. It was just possibility, but I don't think somebody practically using it.
Well,
Is it- like have
I
several-
lurk in the Cash Token developers Telegram channel, and I can see that they're starting to discover things that they didn't know, and it's like this thing goes live next month, so they're still discovering things that they're like, how is this supposed to work?
Yeah, on the joke side, like these Bitcoin related chains, there is a most user of the most percentage of assholes on the ratio of the users. And when the blockchains forks, the assholes also forks with these blockchains, so it's
Yeah,
multiplying all the time.
yeah,
But
yeah. That's the
yeah,
thing.
on
This
Highly concentrated.
this
Yeah,
Bitcoin
but on the-
toxicity, it doesn't seem to it gets diluted, but it never
Yeah.
really goes away.
But on the serious side, like for example, how the Motorola chips working, when you try to connect to the new antenna, you don't abandon immediately the old one.
Mhm.
You just the signal to the old one start to become weaker, and you connect to the new antenna and start to send them more power. So most of the system which trying to balance the friction between switching, they're like slowly fading out and in.
Yeah, that's
Like
a good
in this
analogy.
case, you cannot just like cut SOP, start using this one, because for example, like other these mobile phones, they cut first the first antenna, start searching for the next one, but there's no free spot, so your phone is not working.
right.
Mhm.
So like smart system, it's like slowly fade out and fade in. And I think it's nice approach also to this problem. You cannot just cut all of the links with OSOP and start using these cash tokens, because you don't know will be there a free spot, like will be there like continuing supporting it, everything. So it should be like graduate.
Well,
switch.
especially since there's so many things that we don't know yet. I mean, we can all pretend like we know everything, but this is that infatuation period where we just assume all the things that we don't know is positive. And that's not true. Infatuation is a problem because of that. You just go, oh, I like this person. All the things I don't know must be filled in with all the positive things in my head, but that's not real. That's just your own brain filling that in.
Yeah, when I say hype, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So many people have like projected these things that you can do with them, and like nobody actually knows if you can do that yet.
All I know about it right now is that tokens are going to be on the BCH blockchain May 15th. I really haven't had time to look into it much. I don't understand it a lot. I do
Yeah.
understand SLP pretty well. How big is a Fulcrum or the SLP indexer? It's
Like, how big is the database?
yeah.
I could look real quick. I haven't checked. It's not that big. It's I mean 200 megabytes, I think, maybe. No, I think it's actually in the gigabyte range now. It might be
Okay.
a couple gigabytes.
Like that's another thing that if I'm going to use SLP, maybe I just download the indexer and I have that portion hooked up and running. That makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of the argument I hear against something like SLP is, well, it's not on chain. We got a separate indexer. Like we want to put it on chain. Everything's got to go on chain. Well, it's a lot easier for me to be like, hey, I can just run this thing on probably a Raspberry Pi and use that. Ordinals use a separate indexer too.
Like
I
most
didn't
things use a
realize
separate indexer.
That makes sense though.
OpenSea has all kinds of indexers. I mean, everything uses an indexer. It's all, I mean, not everything is stored on chain, but to argue that SLP is not on chain is a joke, because the reality is everything uses some sort of indexer to make it easy to query, so you don't have to query it off of the blockchain directly every time.
Yeah, what the indexer is doing is it's like the full node, it doesn't know intuitively that this entry is a token. It's a Bitcoin Cash rent. It's the indexer that sort of takes the raw data and indexes it and turns it into metadata that makes sense. And it's really powerful idea. Like, this is one of the core ideas in Bitcoin all the way back in like 2010, when people were talking about all the things that you could do with it. It was largely came down to microtransaction and indexers.
Right.
The full node's not really it's supposed to be pretty dumb. It's just supposed to enforce consensus rules and create this platform on which you can build new layers and new data. And so and this is an idea that sort of atrophied and died because BTC became too expensive to do these things. And then there's just, it just hasn't, it sort of just died in popularity on the Bitcoin Cash chain. But like the simple store protocol, that's the SLP indexer with like a couple extra features added. So this idea, and then there's this whole concept of the low-cat ID, which is kind of ancient history at this point, but it was based on this exact same idea. Like SLP tokens are based on low-cat IDs, and it's this idea, it's this number that you put in front of all the other data on the op return so that the whole op return can be categorized for a specific application. And it's a really powerful idea. I mean, in terms of when you go back to basics and you look at a blockchain as a data structure, and then from that you add a few more features and you get something like Bitcoin. But this idea of a blockchain being able to, put all this as a database, put all this data, and then you have an indexer that crawls it like a search engine and pulls out the metadata that's important to one specific application use. I mean, it's a really powerful idea, and for some reason, this idea has just sort of atrophied. And then there's been this notion of putting everything on the chain.
I think all of the EVM blockchains, they're using this graph protocol. It's exactly this one. It's an intelligent indexer, so you can index just specific area, and speed up the final results. Yeah, and so there's a lot of different ways to express this idea. So like, and one of the things I really like about the way I designed the PSF SLP indexer is that it can run on a Raspberry Pi. Like it does not require any significant hard drive space or memory or computational power, because it's really just, especially once it's fully synced, all you're doing is staying on top of the tip of the chain. That really doesn't take a whole lot of computational power.
Jerry says, by the way, has anybody tried playing with chain graph? I want to, but the documentation is confusing to me. And also most ETH indexers use GraphQL to spit back the exact results you want. I
haven't.
It was great.
I've always resisted looking into graph, either queries or databases or the chain graph. because I've always thought that they would be bloated, but I mean, you're showing me, Aaron, that that's not necessarily the case. They are actually pretty
Yeah.
fast and sporty.
Well, it's with what I've learned working with over the past few months with graph databases is it is not about the size of the database. It's about the relationship connections between the points of data.
Mhm.
So like you can have a database with 1 million nodes in it, as long as you have indexed certain points correctly and you have the right relationships, it can be very, very fast. But that also means that like you got to get out a whiteboard and you have to plan what are your nodes, what are your relationships, what are the properties that are going to go on there, what do you need to have on there, how are you going to call these things. So in a lot of ways, you have to do a little bit more planning on the front end than you would with like a SQL database, although you still should plan for like a SQL or MongoDB, but you have to do a lot of thinking of like, all right, here's the purpose of the database, here is what we need for information, and how are we going to store that information, and how are we going to find it. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's
So
all about connections.
I want to make sure we mention the positives about cash tokens. So the biggest thing, or at least the one I understand, is that they're miner validated. So the SLP is just that, you can put anything you want in the op return. I mean, it may or not be correct. The miner doesn't look at it. It just goes, I mean, it looks at it to make sure it's valid in terms of, the hex code and stuff, but it doesn't check to see. And the cash tokens actually will validate that this happened properly. Like I guess I don't know the full bit, but the miners are involved with making sure that the transaction's correct. But where am I missing there? Because that's not true for SLP. And what's the big difference? Is there anything clear? And then there's some other smart contract thing. I mean, I don't know enough about that either, but I'd like to make sure that we talk about the positives here, because I think there are reasons why they did it. And there are reasons why it's an improvement from SLP in some regard, though it clearly seems like with the V out 0, that it is not an improvement in others.
Well, yeah,
By the way,
go ahead.
I wanted to ask what kind of tooling will come when they release? Like you mentioned, after a month, what will come with this release? Will be there some like ready libraries, like JavaScript libraries to work with these tokens, or?
Mainnet does support it.
Yeah, there's mainnet, and then there's libauth. What mainnet is built on top of libauth. Libauth is a very low level library. And this is what I'm waiting to find out as well. And actually Jerry's been doing some really great work. I mean, this is the reason for my hesitancy or caution, is that I see the same like 6 guys who have been working on this tech for years, and they're super excited about it. And it's been like the same 6 guys for years. And every time a developer like Jerry tries to wrap their head around it, they're just like, I don't get it, and they leave. And I've seen at least half a dozen developers like that, like just really sincerely try to understand the tech and just get frustrated and be like, whatever. So that's why I'm really waiting to see what happens when it launches with mainnet. It is exciting that that they're miner validated, and thus you cannot burn them. They're theoretically backwards compatible in the sense that if you don't update your Fulcrum indexer, it won't even see these token UTXOs. So like you can't even interact with them. And so that's kind of a nice, elegant, backwards compatible solution. And then these guys, like Pat at Mainnet's been working really hard to get some developer tooling in place for May. And what cash tokens really opens the door for is script programming. So you can write a smart contract in Bitcoin script, which is not an easy thing to do. And then you can embed that in the token, and the token can express those rules. So now this sort of programmability that Bitcoin has for Bitcoin, you can now express through a token, and the tokens can have these rules. And on the one hand, that's awesome, but on the other hand, like most people find Bitcoin scripts so difficult to work with that they would just rather use Ethereum.
Right.
And that's been the industry trend. So I don't, one of the things that has been touted is like it's an Ethereum killer. Like, oh yeah, it's Bitcoin plus Ethereum. That's what cash tokens is. And it's like, man, that just doesn't seem like honest marketing to me.
There's some smart contract stuff, but it's not nearly, at least as I understand it, not solidity. I mean, it is some solidity, but not the same. I posted a link. Matthew G has been working on a lot of stuff and built out a really nice, it's a TBCH. So it's a test net using cash tokens, and you can create your own tokens. And he's doing, I mean, I think the UI is nice. It kind of proves out some of the stuff. So if there's interest in like learning more, that's another place. And I can send you some test BCH as well. So I only have like 0.1, but it doesn't take much. So
yeah, let's put that. I'm going to put that link in the Telegram channel.
Because I'd love people to understand more. Not that we're going to activate immediately. I mean, I think, Chris, you've already outlined the reason why you didn't grab onto SBCH immediately and change everything over is you didn't, you want to make sure things play out. You don't want to, and I think one of the things that Shoemaker said earlier was, you build all this stuff and then it goes down. Well, not only is your company screwed, but you're at a minimum, you lost a month or two of work. And I would think even an hour of work is too much to lose. So, I mean, I think it's, figure out what you believe in and where you're going, and let's, use what we can to make this place better.
Yeah. Also, that's well said. And that point stands on its own. Another point is that it comes down to trust. Like one of the reasons I did not even think about touching cash script is that the actual people operating the bridge, like I know them personally and I do not trust them. And they're shysters. And so, and it's the same reason and so that ended up unfortunately being a very pragmatic approach. And when it comes to cash tokens, it's not that I don't trust the people involved. It's that they're tech guys and they really want to push the bleeding edge of the tech and see what they can do with it. They're not really thinking about business problems like, oh, if we do this, then all of a sudden businesses can do X, or like this is going to make the token, like this is going to help mass adoption because it solves, this really immediate business problem. Like that's not the thinking that led to cash tokens. Like they kind of want tokens. They're not really happy with how SLP can burn tokens. And this proposal's been kicked around for years, and so they're passing it because it's cool to them, and it's just like kind of echo chambery. So it's like there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, but that's certainly like no reason for me as a business owner to like adopt that technology. Like it just doesn't solve any problems.
Someone's got to push it forward. So somebody's got to build.
I think that
it takes both.
I think that the other thing to bear in mind is people have radically different understandings of what tokens are good for, right? And they're all legitimate. That's the thing. But they all get lumped into, oh, it's a token. So like if I'm using a token to represent USDT, right? That's radically different than if I'm using a token to like say run Aaron's candy machine. That's the token to run Aaron's candy machine may not even have monetary value, beyond like the candy that's in there. Or if I'm doing rewards points, that's another form of token. I'm not so worried if the rewards points get burned, but the USDT, I don't want that to get burned. So like the idea of what tokens are used for is completely different. Maybe I'm using tokens on a website where you get to go into a special part of the website or some club or some chat room, or maybe I've created a 3D game and you need a token to open the door. That I'm not super worried about those tokens burning, right? As long as I got a mini baton, I can make those things. When they have more value or they have something else attached to them, that's where I can see, okay, I want to make sure it's miner validated. I want to make sure it's on the chain. So I think we'll see this play out, but there's the idea of tokens being like one ubiquitous thing. That's the same as the mono crypto ideology, like we got to have one crypto, tokens are this, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of different things. There are a lot of different applications, meaning there's probably room for both SLP and cash tokens.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, yeah, it's a critical point. In one area where I think that SLP and cash tokens both fail is with network adoption. I mean, I don't necessarily like the way that the ERC20 protocol works, but it is the standard. It's like if you're kind of not even in the game unless you're using ERC20. So I would love to see more technology around bridging SLP or cash tokens to an ERC20 token and be able to move value between different representations of tokens. And yeah, I hope one of the things I want to get out there is I hope to be proven wrong with some of the statements I've made around cash tokens. Like I hope that I look foolish. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I wish nothing but good things for Bitcoin Cash and the cash tokens thing. I'm just very pessimistic based on experience.
Yeah. And there's so much elephant graveyards out there is how I'll say it, when it comes to code. And when especially like when I was looking at Aaron, you're talking about 3D stuff, right? Doing 3D NFTs on your site, which 3JS is probably the way to go, or Babylon JS. But if you're looking into that stuff, you will come across so many elephant graveyards that, somebody created a code in 2016. Great thing. It's not supported anymore. Somebody
Right.
created something in 2018. Great thing. It worked really well. Not supported anymore.
Damn.
JW Player, which is a big MP4 player, used to support 360 3D video. They stopped supporting it in 2022, I think. They just dropped support for it. So it's like there's so many. What I'm saying here is there are so many projects that get up. They're great. Maybe the technologies are great. They become that elephant graveyard over time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as a business guy trying to work out stuff, I mean, I love to support cash tokens as NFTs as well. I mean, I'd love to see Rare like take on that stuff, but I feel like I want to make sure that I'm with PSF right now, and I think the PSF approach is still probably the right approach from the perspective of protecting the amount of work you're doing. We know this works. And then looking at and continue to watch cash tokens and watch how NFTs are coming out on cash tokens and learn what we're going to learn. Like even in Jerry's comment today, we learned some stuff, and I've learned a lot from you already today on the rest of it. So I appreciate everybody's perspective, because this is, otherwise I'm going to start picking up mainnet and start working on this. And I feel like right now, just continue to build with what I'm doing and how we're interfacing right now is the right way to go.
Well, and also I like something you guys both said. I think there's a tie there where this is the difference between an open source project and an open source product. Is a product is produced by a company, and when the company has problems, the product has problems, and that's what creates these elephant graveyards. But an open source project that does not have any sort of commercial thing, it has a lot of cons to it. Like, for example, when an open source project runs into issues and needs specialized knowledge, it stops because it doesn't have the funding to pay for that specialist to get over that hump. The project just kind of comes to a halt, but it never really dies because it's not dependent on any one, developer or company. The code just sort of sits there in hibernation until it gets picked up again, or it doesn't. And so this is what I'm really trying to achieve with the cash stack. And like, if I go away, if the PSF goes away, some Bitcoin is going to exist in one form or another. This UTXO model with the blockchain and the proof of work and the op return, like that's never going to die. If anything, it's going to get more prolific, and there's going to be even more forks in the future. That's something I'm confident in. And so the idea here is like these ideas, and this is one of the things I love about SLP, it being very simple. That it can work on any blockchain with where you can have a memo field And a lot of this code can just be easily adapted to move on to another blockchain. That's what that's ultimately that's what I want to achieve. I want this project to live beyond me. I want this code to like Linux is the sort of the poster child for this. I think Bitcoin is also another, like, I view all the forks of Bitcoin as evidence of success, not failure.
Right.
And so that's the open source is all about options. It's about, like, you don't use open source because it's cost effective. You don't use it because it's superior to commercial software. You use it because it gives you options, and freedom. Like you can just take the code and do what you need to do. And if it turns out you can pay somebody, that's probably the better option. But a lot of times that's not an option. And open source is the only way you can make some forward progress.
Yeah.
So I liked your point about elephant graveyards.
Yeah, that's great. And a good example with the 3D stuff.
Yeah. If you start looking down the 3D rabbit hole, you will find so many abandoned code projects. And, I would go on GitHub and it's like last pull request 2018, or last updated 2018, last updated 2017, last updated, just forever ago. And what's great, what sucks is that some of these projects are awesome. They are great. They did really, really cool stuff. And then somebody moved on, or they went another direction. I did have one more question. Were you able to get my server connected to the web wallet?
Not yet.
yet.
I just haven't had time to dive in there and get that. We need to get the wallet service running. That's the only thing that's not running. Everything else looks like it's running properly. But yeah, I want to get that pay-to-write database sort of tracking system up, get it talking to my instances of the cache stack. Then I'll get your instance of the cache stack running and plug it into that tracking system.
Awesome.
And that, like, it's just, this is what we need, is a system to tell us when things go down, like we shouldn't, otherwise the only option is, like, time goes by and then you're like, oh wow, yeah, things not running. In the meantime, there's like silent users that are just having a bad experience.
Well, and they get frustrated and they leave, right? Because I think it doesn't take much for people to go, oh, this dumb thing don't work, right? I sometimes that is dumb thing don't work, and then they just forget about it.
Dumb thing don't work.
Right. And it's easy for that to happen because people just, like, their brain goes, oh, well, I guess that doesn't work anymore, and they move on, right? So I appreciate the fact that you're working on that, because I feel like that's one of the things that's easy to forego and easy to forget, and then we don't even know who's disappointed by it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, great, guys. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. It's been almost an hour and a half. As always, I really appreciate your time and attention and your feedback. I always get so much out of these meetings.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's great.
See y'all. Stay and get some sleep, man.
Yeah.
It's
Time maybe to hit the bed.